The Turbo CD attachment for the TurboGrafx brought players amazing opportunities, particularly for RPGs. What we would imagine when we would see still screens for cutscenes actually became cutscenes. The voices in our heads for characters were realized as actual voices, and the music of RPGs, great stuff typically, was given a new means of expression through CD quality audio. The Turbo CD had some great RPGs, and I'm sharing with you a few of them here. Let's go in the order of the game I found the least enjoyable to the one that I found the most enjoyable. First up, but still good, is Dungeon Explorer 2. By the time we got Dungeon Explorer 2 on the TurboGrafx-CD in 1993, it was criticized as being a little behind the times. Maybe it's fair to consider it one of the last hurrahs for the TurboGrafx. This game, as you probably suspected, is a sequel, and it's a sequel to one of the earliest multiplayer action RPGs on consoles. Dungeon Explorer 2 might have relied on nostalgia while trying to up the ante with better graphics, deeper character options, and full CD audio, but by its release, the party had, already moved on. It's pretty easy to see the story of this game through the price of the game. Holy moly. As a solid game that was at the end of a system's life cycle, it's wildly expensive, fetching over $1,000 for a US copy. Is it worth $1,000? Well, obviously not, at least not gameplay wise. But if you're a collector and, you have to have it anyway, I guess you could breathe a sigh of relief knowing it's at least a good game, right? Sometimes we find ourselves paying big money for bad games if you're collecting. Dungeon Explorer 2 is a strange kind of time capsule. It's a neat relic that gives you a look into what could have been if NEC's TurboGrafx hadn't just, bit the dust. The plot wastes no time. It's a direct follow-up to the last game, and you're tasked with retrieving the Aura Stone, saving the princess, and thus saving the land of Odysseia. Pretty standard stuff. But where it shines is in how it lets you feel like a team of heroes on a quest. You can choose from a range of character classes like in the first game, which include fighter, thief, wizard, cleric, bard, hunter, dwarf, among some others. I think dwarf's in there. Hopefully. I can't remember, I get this one in part 1 mixed up. You and some buddies, if you've got buddies, set off on a top-down action RPG adventure full of dungeons, secrets, traps, and pretty cool bosses. If you don't have buddies, it's all up to you and your choice of these characters. At least you get to, change classes along the way. That's something. You just hop in the bar and switch it up as you need. See, the wizard is always tempting in any game I play. I enjoy playing a wizard. But I played mostly the fighter because I was looking for a character who could take a hit, and wizards aren't known for taking hits. Despite desiring to play a bard, the bard sucked in part 1. To be fair, maybe I just didn't know what I was doing as the bard in part 1. Oh well, I figured the fighter would be easier. Speaking of which, a criticism of this game is that it's too easy. Now those folks might have just been pretty weathered adventurers because I thought the difficulty felt just right, like Baby Bear's porridge or something. The Turbo CD format gets put to work again with the anime cutscenes, voiced characters at times, and the powerful soundtrack. I read that some folks criticize the music, but I think it's pretty great. The voice acting ain't nothing to write home about. It is a little cheesy, but it's nothing particularly miserable. It's just serviceable. It's fine. It makes sense for the time. Cutscenes have that late 80s anime style, which I freaking love, complete with melodrama and expressive eyes. You could tell that they were going for epic, and sometimes it hits. What makes Dungeon Explorer 2 stand out, of course, is that 5-player support. If you have the Turbo Tap and some friends, and that's a big if, you apparently could have a chaotic, laugh-filled co-op RPG experience. And this was before Diablo, before Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. And it seems like it was a really special experience, by my understanding. This game isn't perfect, despite that big price tag. Hit detection is iffy at times and the balance is, questionable. Some classes are nearly useless. Bard. And despite the fun of the dungeon exploring itself, the game can still feel a bit grindy. If you don't try to convince yourself that it's supposed to be perfect, you'll enjoy it that much more. Dungeon Explorer 2 wasn't trying to be perfect, it was trying to be fun. And in that, hey, it succeeds. Here's an unfortunate thing about the game. By 1993, the TurboGrafx-CD was basically finished in North America. Dungeon Explorer 2 was one of the final first-party RPGs released, and to my knowledge, it became a bit of a swan song for the system. Again, when this sort of stuff happens, we get wild prices like this one. It never saw ports, remasters, or much recognition, really. And Dungeon Explorer, again, to my knowledge, just sort of faded away. When there's not a lot of copies being sold, the copies that are left go for ridiculous prices, particularly if it's the end of the life cycle and it's a good game. A cheering mention from me is that the game, in my opinion, is much more enjoyable than Part 1 on the Sega CD. Upon further research, apparently the game is actually pretty different on the Sega CD anyway. Maybe I actually should have tried out the Bard in this one. I don't know. I personally think this game is a blast. The dungeons are a little short. It feels a little more non-linear, but I could have just been fooled. The dungeon areas that are short lead to bosses that are enjoyable little segments of action RPG. And collecting that yellow gem after a boss just feels so satisfying. It feels like progress. It is a rather brief game, clocking in at about 10 hours or less. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, unless you pay $1,500 for it. Woo, be regretting that one maybe. If you're emulating, however, like most folks would, I'd argue that it's totally worth a few hours of your time, particularly if you're looking for an RPG to play with some buddies. Taking a step down in polish, but taking a step up in scale and voice acting and cutscene quality, just a lot of things is this next game. And I can actually see why it was re-released years later. If you squint a little, it's actually not too hard to see why people like Cosmic Fantasy II. In 1992, Working Designs graced us with Cosmic Fantasy II for the North American market. This is the same Working Designs that was a localization studio famous and infamous for its quirky translations and relentless pursuit of charm in the early days of anime-inspired RPGs. Working Designs did some awesome things, and they did some not so awesome things. While the original Cosmic Fantasy never made it stateside, the sequel stood out as its own complete story, giving the TurboGrafx-CD a memorable and emotionally charged RPG experience. You play as the young space adventurer Van, whose idyllic life is upended when his girlfriend Laura is kidnapped. That setup might sound, like so many games, but it sets the stage for a heartfelt, surprisingly dark, and occasionally funny journey across multiple planets. What begins as a lighthearted and routine story quickly evolves into a coming-of-age tale full of loss, love, and sacrifice. For a game released in the early 90s, it wasn't afraid to lean into mature emotional beats, despite some immature translations.
No, Pixel Bro, you just don't get it.
Maybe, but it is kind of odd at times what Working Designs does to the text in a game. It's a little rough. Doesn't it seem a bit odd for your uncle to be asking you, the first NPC you talk to, your uncle, asks you, is that a spear in your pocket or are you happy to see me? What? I'm not exaggerating. The first NPC you talk to is your pervy uncle. Not impressed? Maybe I don't get it. How about this town where all the dudes are wimps and the mayor can't help anyone because he has hemorrhoids? Hemorrhoids? It's such a bizarre tonal mismatch. But don't get me wrong, that seems like maybe aggressively mean of me to be talking about Working Designs in such a manner, but folks, it's hard to deny that that's some tonally weird stuff for this game. I can appreciate the weirdness, that's fine, but we do have to admit that's different. Graphically, Cosmic Fantasy II showed off the benefits of CD-ROM technology, especially in its anime cutscenes. The character sprites and other graphics are fine for an early 8 or 16-bit system, but the thing that really makes it work with the Turbo CD is those anime cutscenes. They're actually stellar, in my opinion. These full motion sequences, complete with voice acting, were nothing short of revolutionary at the time. They gave the game cinematic flair and added emotional weight to key story moments. It was easier to relate to Van's despair, Laura's terror, and the menace of the villains. Sprite-based cutscenes prior to the CD animations simply couldn't as easily convey this. Even though the animations were rudimentary by today's standards, they're super charming and pack a punch that players will remember. The music also deserves, I think, the same praise that we give the other excellent CD games back in the day. Okay, so maybe it's not as good as Ease, but I don't think it's that terribly far off. The CD quality soundtrack created an adventurous atmosphere that elevated every dungeon crawl and plot twist. You could tell the composers poured love into every track, making the game feel like a living and breathing world. Again, not quite Ease, but deserving of praise nonetheless. One of the few issues I had with the music is that it would reset as you stepped into a merchant shop. It was sort of abrupt to hear town themes just start over and over so often in towns. Gameplay-wise, the turn-based combat is solid, if unremarkable. You get in and out of battles pretty quickly. The backgrounds don't change when you get into battle. They just put some enemy sprites over top of the town or whatever you're in to make it look okay. It didn't reinvent the wheel, but I don't think it was looking to, really. The real hook was the story and the journey itself. That being said, the game has a few notable flaws. Random encounter rates are a bit brutal, especially if you're lost in a cave or something. You will likely find grinding mandatory, and the game lacked the polish of bigger budget JRPGs from the same era. There's just a lot of little things going on. Now, the story didn't take long to get rolling, but I walked from the town to the next town and almost back before I saw a battle. All right, cool. There's a few mobs, and just a little poke here, and a little poke there with my spear, and they'll be dead, right? Not so much. Just a little poke 6 or 7 pokes. Well, good grief. The first battle was that long, and I gained a level on the first battle? What on earth? That's like weird. There was a spot in the ground that was supposed to be a cave, and I just walked over the hole over and over until I realized, oh, you gotta click on it to open this open cave. My bad. I fought in the first town for a long time to level up and to fight the first boss, because he whipped me the first time, right? Enemies were overrunning the town, and I slept and fought for about a solid week in the town. That night that was waiting on me, I sure hope he has the time on his hands to just stand out there and wait for me to level up so I can whip him. The shopkeep offers new wares. Well, that's cool. But it doesn't tell me any stats on them. I can click more info and, oh, okay. It gives me a brief description, but it still doesn't tell me the stats. It doesn't tell me how much attack it gives me or whatever, or how my stats improve. It just says, this is a knife or whatever. I guess you just buy blindly and hope. Just hope you get it figured out. The spells don't explain what they do. You just have to experiment with them. Just cast a few spells and see what happens. Drop a little Leviosa there and a little Avada Kedavra on your buddy and see what happens.
Wingardium Leviosa.
One character at one point in the game leveled up by experience, and that's normal, right? But the other character with me was leveling up by walking. I guess that she gained levels outside of combat. When you get another party member, if you push A over and over to attack, you'll find yourself at an impasse. You have to choose a character and the action, and then let that action take place, and then choose the other character who has not acted and an action after that. Like, it doesn't automatically just scroll combat to the next available player's turn. It's just odd stuff, a lot of little odd things. But those issues are, easier to forgive when the game's heart is so front and center, like it is in Cosmic Fantasy II. If you go into this game expecting a classic JRPG and accept its flaws, you're likely going to enjoy yourself. I mean, there is a reason Cosmic Fantasy II didn't become a household name, and its legacy was overshadowed by more refined titles on other platforms. But for TurboGrafx-CD fans, it's still a landmark, a bold attempt at storytelling that took advantage of the hardware's strengths. It combined early anime aesthetics, emotional storytelling, and then groundbreaking presentation into something that still has a cult following today. It may not top RPG tier lists, but it belongs on any shelf, celebrating the games that dared to dream big when hardware and budgets were so small. Cosmic Fantasy II didn't always have the strongest sword in the fight, to be fair, but like Van, it kept fighting for love. And it's a cool game. Sorry for pooping all over working designs a little bit there. This next game received some heavy censorship, but it's still very, very enjoyable. I've been wanting to jump into this game for a while now. I thought the premise was really interesting, and when I finally did, I wasn't disappointed. It's surprisingly epic. I'm talking about Exile. Exile feels like a secret, like an ancient text that you find in some cavern. It's surprisingly bold and thus unforgettable. It's a game that dares to question what would happen if you combined real-world religions, disguised of course, for the version we're talking about, the censored version, political conspiracies, mysticism, and side-scrolling action. A weird combination, but a very cool combination. Released in North America in 1992 for the TurboGrafx-CD, Exile is a bit subversive due to its themes, but it's certainly an ambitious RPG of its era. This controversial combination of gameplay and ideas is one that could have only been born from this experimental CD-ROM age, and I'm here for it. You play as Sadler, a Syrian assassin turned holy warrior, on a journey that takes you to several different locations in pursuit of his ultimate goal. The intention is to unite East and West through a mysterious artifact known as the Holy Bags. Now, that's not like the Christian Pokemon or whatever, but the powered up Christian Pokemon. It's certainly not a squeaky clean game, even after censorship. The original version referenced multiple religions, including Christianity, which was changed to Clispinism, I guess? Clispinism? Christian? Clispin? Ah, the Clispins. It also referenced several other religions and a variety pack of mystical and political ideologies. In the original, you're recreationally dealing with some substances and you must kill some, pretty important figures. I'll let you look up who those political figures are because I don't want to be on that watch list. You might be on that watch list if you look it up, but it ain't going to be me. It ain't going to be me. I am a happy man with good feelings. Moving on. Because of this wildness, it's no surprise that Exile was heavily censored in its Western release, toning down the religious references and drug use. Even in its watered down form, it still feels dangerous, like you found something in the cavern that you weren't supposed to. Gameplay is a hybrid of overhead RPG exploration, as you'd expect in, most RPGs. I mean, this looks correct. Then it changes to 2D side-scrolling action, and I get excited. It reminds me of Zelda 2 in that sense, and oh gosh, I sure do love that game. You know what, if you guys can think of any other games that do this, like have the little 2D sprites walking around and then suddenly you're into side-scrolling action stuff, I would love to know about them. I really, really like that style of gameplay. I'm not being facetious, I'm not trying to push the algorithm. I want to know. I just want to play some more. In towns and on the world map, you talk to NPCs, buy items, and manage your equipment. When you enter a dungeon, however, suddenly you're platforming and slashing through enemies in real time with a satisfying sword swing and the occasional magic spell. The sword swing kind of reminds me of Strider. I mean, it's not quite as satisfying as Strider, but it's not bad. It has enough of that twitchy, arcade-like energy to keep your hands engaged while your brain processes the surprisingly heavy plot. And this juxtaposition works really well. The magic system is handy once you get access to it, as spells can enhance your sword and the amount of damage you do to enemies. It also allows you to restore your HP rather than buy those expensive items from the shop. Good luck peddling your miracle tonics now, you jerks. Something I discovered on my first playing of the game years ago is that the first cave is tougher than shoe leather. I got decimated back then and I just quit the game. This time I cheated. Oh Lord, I cheated like a wild man, using rewind over and over to get through. But once I finally finished that cave, the rest of the game really became much more balanced. It sort of felt like that first day on the job or in the class where the authority is much harder on you to weed out the weaklings. Well, if that's the case, it certainly worked on me the first time around. After persevering through that frustration, the rest of the game is enjoyably balanced in my experience. So don't give up, it becomes worth the effort. What made Exile truly shine on the TurboGrafx-CD was like many of the games at the time. It was what made the TurboGrafx-CD and simultaneously working designs shine. It's the presentation. I know what you're thinking.
Man, he's dogging on working designs, and then the next time he's loving on them.
Well, yeah, I think they're kind of deserving of both, man. They're great, and then sometimes they're not great. But we forgive here. We forgive. I don't know that we forget, but we forgive. The CD format enabled atmospheric, hauntingly good audio that ranged from tribal drums to sitar-infused melodies and synth tracks. The voice acting, while stilted and melodramatic by today's standards, was groundbreaking for the time, giving life to key story scenes and giving Sadler's World a feeling of weight and consequence. Nowadays it might not be as impressive, but it's enjoyable nonetheless. It's better with it than without it, for sure. Visually, the game is bold, with colorful character portraits and lush backgrounds. I expected much more yellow and sand given my impressions from the cover, but it's quite varied, which is, of course, welcomed. The side-scrolling segments are seriously fun, and they're definitely one of my favorite parts of the game. Again, once you make it out of that ant hell, it's really super fun action platforming. Each area is surprisingly varied in setting and rich in mood. There's a dreamlike quality to the visuals and audio that enhances the game's surreal, hallucinatory tone. An oasis of graphics and story that makes you question the validity of what you're enjoying. I think that's a good thing. Like, I'm not sure, but I think it's a good thing. It's like something odd that you just, again, happen to pick up and not be expecting, like some kind of weird relic in the middle of the forest or something. Exile, even after the censorship, isn't afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. Who gets to define good and evil?
From my point of view, the Jedi are evil!
What if holy wars are just manipulations of power rather than extreme evangelism? What if peace requires tearing down everything sacred? For a 16-bit game to even approach such themes, especially in 1992, is nothing short of astonishing, and I'm here for it. The more I played, the more I wanted to play. I haven't tried the second game out at all, but I'll definitely be visiting it when I come back to do more RPGs on the TurboGrafx-CD. Is it flawed? Well, does a bear wear a pointy hat or the Pope crap in the woods? Yeah, of course it is. It's an old game, folks. It's a trailblazer. The platforming can be clunky, the hit detection is a little loose at times. The difficulty at the beginning, as I noted before, feels very uneven. But none of that matters as much as the experience itself. Exile is less about perfect gameplay and more about daring to be different. It's an artifact from a time when developers were perhaps a little more comfortable with experimenting. Not just with graphics and sound, but with meaning, and for that, I say it's worth your time. Hey folks, if you've made it this far and you're not like elbow deep in dishes, or you're not finishing up work while I'm just yammering on in the background, consider taking a moment to like this video if you've liked it and to subscribe to the channel. Only if you really want to though. I have several other videos featuring many other retro systems and RPGs. You might find something else you like, or you may have found your next video binge. Either way, I appreciate your patronage, friend. Let's continue. Dragon Slayer, The Legend of Heroes. Before The Legend of Heroes became the extremely sprawling narrative with anime-style heroes that is Falcom's beloved Trail series, it was just a humble subtitle, tagging along at the end of Dragon Slayer. And what a difference it is when you compare the two. Released in 1992 on the TurboGrafx-CD, Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes became the transition of Nihon Falcom's legacy. They went from dungeon crawling that the series was so invested in, you might check out Dragon Slayer 4 on the Other Nintendo RPGs video, into narrative-heavy JRPG territory across many games. And while it's clearly dated, it's quite a pleasant and charming game to jump into under this understanding. It is unabashedly a retro RPG in the throes of transition both technically and conceptually. And if you can accept that, you might find it in your heart to love it. I know I have. When you see something like growing and transitioning over time, maybe you have children like I do, and you see them start toddling and stumbling. The knee-jerk reaction to a kid falling over might be a giggle or a gasp of fear. But in the long run, this part's important. That's what it's like, playing this game, knowing where it came from and knowing where it's going. It's sort of beautiful in its own clumsy way and enjoyable all the same. You play as Prince Logan, a classic reluctant hero who has to step up when the kingdom of Farlaline, I think that's how you pronounce it, descends into chaos after monsters appear out of nowhere and attack. His father, the king, dies in the skirmish. A weird dude named Baron Drax takes over and the young prince goes to live in Exile. Yes, that's the name of the town, capital E-X-I-L-E. It's pretty on the nose. 10 years later, monsters start attacking the village of Exile, and you learn that Drax has been the one behind it. But don't let this simple story premise fool you. Beneath the familiar exterior lies a game trying to evolve what a JRPG could be. It's part political drama, part fairy tale, and part coming-of-age story wrapped in Falcom's early storytelling ambition, and that's a pretty sweet recipe. Visually, the TurboGrafx-CD version features colorful, detailed sprites and an overhead view like the early Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest titles. The thing that made this stand out above all those early games, though, was that sweet CD audio. The soundtrack, which seems to be Falcom's bread and butter with every game, makes full use of the hardware. From quiet, emotional piano melodies and reflective moments to triumphant battle themes, it's a reminder of how much sound can elevate a game's emotional impact. Similarly impressive for the time, the CD format also allowed for fully voiced scenes. And as noted before in the video, this is some cutting-edge stuff for its time. It's not just in cutscenes either, which I thought was pretty cool. It pops up a little unexpected, but it's welcome when many of the sprites are just standing around sharing exposition. The voice acting in this game might objectively be some of the worst I have ever heard. And I could be crazy, but I think some of the accents change along the way. It's pretty bad. It really sounds like the programming dudes just picked up one of those cassette players with the red button, hit record, and just started having that in. They're like, we're going to do some dialogue for this game, but anybody can do this. It's just talking, right? Record, and then they started trying our accents and goofing around, and that's what we ended up with. You know what that makes this? Wonderful. It's so bad it's good. Shame on me, maybe, but I really think I like this sort of stuff, like how some folks enjoy bad horror movies on purpose. Bad voice acting in video games is just right up there next to sliced bread in terms of greatness for me. If you have any suggestions of bad voice acting in retro titles, please let me know in the comments so I can go enjoy them. Again, crazy? Maybe. Combat is about as classic turn-based as it comes. You'll engage in random encounters, equip gear, and level up your party of characters as you progress through towns, dungeons, and story events. There's no job system, there's no tactical grid, heck, there's not even front row and back row for your party. It's just solid foundational JRPG combat. And it's a bit nostalgic and weirdly refreshing to see it in its simplicity. What keeps the gameplay from feeling stale is the constant narrative drive. There really isn't much downtime between story beats in this game, and I can appreciate that. It only takes about 16 hours to beat according to howlongtobeat.com, and hey, that's also refreshing. Characters come and go, relationships evolve, and major events shake up the story in ways that were still rare for early 90s RPGs. The emphasis on story foreshadows the intricate narrative we'd later see from Falcom, and the stuff that would carry the series from entry to entry with folks still chomping at the bit for the next Legend of Heroes game. A great amount of the appeal of this game is in the presentation. In a sea of cartridge RPGs on the NES and Super Nintendo, This CD-based version stood out with its cinematic quality. Maybe bad cinema, but still cinematic quality. The opening video is gorgeous. That voice acting's... it is what it is. The music is stellar. The animated parts of the game are so impressive and enjoyable even today. The audio-visual fidelity of this game makes it feel like a top-shelf game, even if the core mechanics are maybe overly familiar. Maybe we'll call it comfortable instead. Yeah, this game is comfortable. Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes is an interesting bridge between eras. You can see the last vestiges of 80s design with the grindy battles, the prevalent anime art styles that were so popularized in the 80s, and the game being a set of simple objectives. But you can also sense the shift towards modern RPG storytelling, the early seeds of an impressive series. This game laid some concrete, some absolute foundation for this series, and maybe that's part of the appeal as well. It's difficult to disrespect this game despite its shortcomings. It's sort of like Dave Chappelle's skill where he's so reluctant to criticize Michael Jackson because he's like, you know, Michael wrote Thriller. He wrote Thriller, man. Without this game, there may be no Trails in the Sky, no Cold Steel, and certainly no massive interconnected RPG universe that it came to be. You might not be looking for Dragon Slayer: Legend of Heroes. It may not have even been on your radar. But if you take the gamble and spend some time with it, you'll find a surprisingly heartfelt ride from a studio that was just finding its voice. You should probably consider checking out this early CD JRPG that's an absolute gem in the TurboGrafx-CD library. It's a bit of a history lesson, but it's certainly a fun study. Maybe it's a shame on me moment, or maybe it's just really, really obvious what this last game's going to be. I can't help it. This game is just so incredibly epic and so enjoyable. It doesn't matter that it's short. That's a feature of the game, is that it's short. I've been enjoying the original game in this series for years, and it makes sense that we as RPG enthusiasts are willing to follow this hero wherever he goes in his many, many journeys. The game that I enjoyed most for this video is Ys Book 1 and 2. I no longer own Ys Book 1 and 2 on the TurboGrafx-CD, unfortunately. I remember the day it came in the mail though. It was like finding treasure from gaming's early CD-ROM era, and I felt like I could still feel the magic emanating from it. It felt powerful, distinct, beautiful. The game still feels that way today. Before full motion video became a staple in every title of the era, shoehorned in or not, and every title had CD quality audio, which typically meant good quality music but questionable voice acting, Ys showed us what this new medium of video gaming could be. Ys Book 1 and 2 isn't a game, it's an experience. It's a beautiful blend of RPG, anime, and almost rock opera. And for the right kind of player who appreciates all these things, it was unforgettable. That's me. I'm that player. Released in 1990 in the US, Ys Book 1 and 2 bundled together the first two entries in Falcom's long-running action RPG series and sort of remastered them for the NEC's TurboGrafx-CD. I guess that's what you would call it. It's kind of wild to think that we were getting remasters at this point already. I guess it's just an impressive port, we should say. The game was initially developed for the PC-88 and it looked like this. Still pretty impressive. In the Ys series, you play as Adal Kristen, a red-haired swordsman of few words and endless curiosity, a man of the world, a fixer, a Highlander, a fellow with some real wanderlust. You heard me correctly, by the way. The Ys series is the same Adal over and over. This guy has seen a lot. In the first two entries, Adal battles evil across the ancient land of Asteria. The story feels so grandiose in scale. Two ancient goddesses, floating islands, magic tomes, and a land slowly falling under shadow. The delivery of Ys unto salvation, like in the story, is on par with the delivery of cinematic flair that the developers blessed us with, and it was basically unprecedented for the time. If you know of a similar or better delivery, hey, let me know. I don't want to be correct for pride reasons in asserting that this is one of the few like this. I want to play more games like this. That's what I want. You can't talk Ys without talking the music. This series is incredibly well known for having banger music. I mean, really, it's one of the first things that hits you after you get to the gameplay. You know, even from the opening theme actually, you're dropped into a soundscape that feels like it belongs in a theater, not a living room in the 90s. Whether it was the easy listening of Fountain of Love or the progressive rock of Palace of Destruction, the soundtrack doesn't just accompany the game, it defines it. For a whole generation of players, Ys was their first proof that video game music could pierce your heart, stir your soul, and sting your eyes. And then there was the voice acting.
I am Lilia from Rance Village. I felt a cold shiver down my spine, and I felt compelled to come in this direction.
And I know what you're thinking. It may seem a little cheesy by today's standards, but in 1990, hey, this is Oscar-worthy. Characters have personality. Dialogue feels weighty and alive. Even the narration made you feel like you were reading a lost legend from some long-forgotten civilization, like the opening to a Miyazaki film or something. Okay, maybe it's not that good, but it's really not that far off, I would argue. It's a storybook brought to life with pixels, and it's legendary. You ever see whippersnappers out on the dance floor grinding all over each other? Well, imagine it in a more gratifying manner, and you've got the combat of ease. This game introduced players to the infamous bump combat system. There were no attack buttons, you just ran into enemies at slightly off-center angles. God forbid you attack something that is even level with you or stronger than you, it'll absolutely get you. It sounds strange, but hey, it worked. I actually sort of dreaded trying this when I first heard of it years ago, but I think it's 100% part of the charm now. It's weirdly satisfying to just walk through your enemies. Combat was fast, kinetic, and incredibly enjoyable once you got the rhythm down. Leveling up felt tangible. Maybe that's because you're always touching enemies. But leveling, of course, was huge. One level could mean the difference between being a helpless wanderer and a walking tank. The upgrades to armor and stats in this game are so important. You can feel a new piece of gear and its effectiveness almost immediately, and that's encouraging. One of the best parts of ease for me, I think, is the pacing. This game isn't very long. It's not very long at all. It respects your time. You never wander aimlessly for very long. There's a constant goal. You get in and you get out. These are towns, dungeons, and narrative beats that move with momentum, almost the same momentum that your character moves with, obliterating plot and story beats as quickly as the enemies. There's no grinding for hours, there's no filler. It's just an earnest tale told at the perfect clip, with dungeons that felt perfectly vast and secrets that felt meaningful. If we don't associate Ys Book 1 and 2 with a CD-ROM RPG, maybe we should. It's the first true RPG masterpiece to hit the medium. It showed the world how much more immersive games could be with the right hardware, the right soundtrack, and the right heart. It might not be a household name like Final Fantasy, but if you've played it, it's pure enchantment. If you haven't, you should play it. It's been released at several different iterations, including newer ones where you actually swing the sword. As for me, personally, I like the bump and grind.